Hello and welcome to my channel, The Desi American.
Hi.
So today's topic is IELTS. There are many prospective students and PR applicants who have to give IELTS in order to come to Canada or Australia. And in that case, especially for the PR applicants, it becomes very important to give IELTS and get a very good score, the max being 8777, 8 being in listening and 7 in all the other sections, so that they can get a higher score and thus increase their chances of getting a PR. So that is why I have invited Fez today because I usually call him an IELTS pro. He gave the IELTS exam once and he got a score of 9 in all the sections, right?
Yeah.
So Fez, I would like you to give some tips to my viewers as to how they can increase their IELTS score.
So yeah, in my case, probably it was beginner's luck that I got a good score in the very first attempt, and I did not get a lot of time for practicing the IELTS exam. But I would strongly recommend that it's always best that you are familiar with the format of the exam and you do enough practice before appearing for the exam, because it always helps.
Yes, and I believe you should be very consistent with your practice and should time yourself. So when you are practicing, let's say reading comprehension, just do not go and do a comprehension. Time yourself that you are completing that in the specified time lot which you would be doing during your IELTS exam.
Yeah.
It is only then that I would call it like a proper practice for the exam.
Yeah, because IELTS is not just about communication, it's also about time management. So
Right.
It's imperative that you do enough practice so that you are able, and as Preeti mentioned, right, timing yourself, that's again a very, very important point. So for each and every section, please do time yourself and see whether you are able to complete the sections in the given amount of time.
Right. So now let's go through each of the sections and see what tips do you have for my viewers. And I would like you to begin with listening, because this particular section holds the most weightage. Just before we begin with the tips, let me give you an overview of the listening format. For those of you who don't know, listening format would be that you would be given an audio. So that may be a monologue where a person is giving a speech, or it might be a conversation between two people. And before you listen to that, you would be given a few seconds, I think around 20 seconds or so.
Probably, yeah, just to go through the answers.
Just to go through the questions.
Yeah.
So Fez, people would definitely prepare for it. However, do you have some pointers which people can keep on mind when they are preparing for listening so that they can follow that?
So the first tip would be listening out for keywords. So when you're going through those questions, right, at that time itself you can just look out for those keywords so that when you are actually listing the questions, you can easily recall it. So yeah, that would be my point number one, listening out for keywords.
And then, since you mentioned about keywords, I think point number 2 should be that when you're storing the keyword, just don't store that particular word in mind, because there might be some indirect questions, correct?
Yeah, so that's again a very valid point. So as you go through the examination, the first few questions would obviously be simple, straightforward and very direct. So those you can easily crack. And as the exam progresses, then you will see questions which are not necessarily direct. So in those questions, they would actually use a lot of adjectives or synonyms which might have similar meaning, words having similar meaning, but they are different words. They are not actually the same words which would be there in your question. So
Right.
It's important to know the meaning of those words as well.
And now one example for indirect, apart from synonyms and adjectives, would be, for example, if two people are, let's say, conversing in the audio, one person says that the per annum package is 24,000, right?
Yeah.
But your question might say, what is the per month package.
True. Yeah.
Correct?
So in that case, you have to divide it by 12, right? So yeah, things like these are very important. So it is not just about storing the exact word as Preeti mentioned. It's also about storing that information in your brain so that once the question comes, then you can easily relate to that question and recall those answers.
Correct.
There could be questions where there could be more than one answer to that question. So in those cases, they would definitely mention in the instruction section. But generally what happens is that we concentrate more on the questions rather than reading through the instructions. So it would always be a good idea to go through the instruction carefully, because there they would clearly highlight if these questions would have a single answer or multiple answers. So that would be definitely my point number 3.
Right. Now let's go to the second section of reading. The passages which are given for IELTS, they are huge and you have very limited time slot. So if you go on to read the whole passage, you'll just run out of time.
That's true. So in that case, I would say my first point would be read between the lines. Don't try to just go through the entire passage. Instead, again, go through the questions first, and then based on that, look out for the answers in the passage. So yeah, you have to do like a fast reading or something like that in order to get these answers completed within the given amount of time.
Yeah, and usually what I've seen is, and I've heard this from a number of other sources too, if you read the first passage, you will get an idea about what kind of information the user is the writer is passing on to the user.
Mm-hmm.
So if the passage is like detailed description and then in the end you have a gist of all the information in it, then I think reading just the end part would
sometimes helps.
Yeah,
yes.
It sometimes helps.
Yeah.
But this is not true for all the cases, because every writer has their own style of writing, correct?
That's true. Yeah. So just before appearing for the exam, just ensure that you are practicing enough in reading comprehension so that you can time yourself and you get into this habit of reading those passages as fast as you could.
I think the third most important point would be vocabulary, because this is where we usually lose out on points.
So vocabulary is something which cannot be developed overnight. It is about how much you are reading books, reading newspapers, gathering new words in your kitty. So I think all of that is important, and that happens over a period of time. You just cannot develop a vocabulary overnight.
Right.
That's not going to happen. So, but what you can do is rather than just learning new words, I would say you have to learn how to use those words in a sentence. I think that is of utmost importance.
I would also bring your point on listening here, because again here you have to remember the keywords. So even before you begin with your reading, you get a few seconds to scan through the questions, or actually that should be your process of attempting this reading section. First, go through the questions and gather some keywords in it, and then start going through the passage so that you can easily neglect the information which you do not need at all.
Yeah.
So this was all about reading and listening. Now let's go to writing. So there are two different sections for writing.
Yes.
Correct?
So for general IELTS, the first section is actually letter writing. So that constitutes 33% of the marks. And the second section is essay writing, which constitutes around 67% of the marks.
Okay. So let's first talk about letter writing.
Yeah. So in letter writing, there is a word limit which you have to achieve. I think that is 150 words. So make sure that you always write more than the specified amount of words. So it can be more than 150, but it should not be less than 150, because if it is less than 150, then you get penalized for writing less words. So that's point number one.
Second point would be, I think you should keep all your sentences short.
Very important. Your sentences should be short and crisp, because the longer sentences that you use, chances of making a grammatical mistake becomes more.
And spellings. So I think spellings is important, like even for listening and reading and writing.
Yeah, in all the sections.
In all the sections, because let's say you got an answer right, but if your spelling is wrong, you lose marks. I mean, you don't get any marks at all. So spellings is another important thing.
Also the choice of words. So the words that you use should be used in a proper context. A lot of time what happens is that we know a lot of words, but whether or not that word is used in the right context, that actually matters more than just using that word.
So this is the first section of letter writing. Let's go to the second section. Is it different?
Second section, as I said, so it has more weightage. It has 67% of the marks, and even the word limit now bumps up to 250. So for letter writing it was 150, now it's 250. So you have to write more, therefore more marks. And so I would say how I go about it is generally I divide the essay into 3 paragraphs. So the first paragraph is generally the introduction, where you just give a background of the essay based on the topic, right? You just give an intro, a background on the topic. Then as you progress into the body, which is the second para of the essay, where you put in all the facts and the figure, it is actually the portion where you put in more information, more details. And after that comes the final paragraph, which is the conclusion. So the conclusion is actually the place where you put in your final opinion or thoughts on the subject. It could also contain a problem to a solution if your essay is talking about a problem. So
or sometimes they ask you whether you're for or against something, right?
Yes.
So that would also get covered in the conclusion. So now let's move on to the last part, which is speaking. I think speaking is relatively easier compared to the other sections, and I say that because what I've seen is usually the examiner tends to talk in general about you in the beginning to ease you out. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, so the first few minutes would be breaking the ice. So that's where the examiner would ask you common questions like what do you do, what's your name, what are your hobbies, stuff like those, which are pretty straightforward. So yeah, then comes the later part, which is part 2 and part 3.
Yeah, and those are a little difficult. Difficult in the sense that usually the topics are not as if you have to talk about like politics, or they're not huge topics in the sense that there's a lot you may not know about. They are a very general topic.
Probably the kind of essays that you get, the kind of questions that you get in your high school or college, I think it would be of that standard, definitely not tough. However, it's always best to prepare for the worst, right? So you hope for the best and you prepare for the worst. I think that's the strategy which you should follow.
Basically what they are looking out for is how confidently you can put forward what is going on in your mind, right?
That's true.
How easily you can form sentences and communicate those thoughts to the other person who's listening to you.
True. Speaking is all about articulating your thoughts into sentences. That's exactly what they are looking for. So the examiner will let you speak on that topic for the first 2 or 3 minutes, after which he will start interrupting by asking counter questions on the topic. And that is the part which is tricky.
You have to be very proactive with your answers. You have to be very sure about on what you're saying.
In speaking, what I would suggest is don't take very long pauses.
So in terms of how to prepare, what I would usually do is give myself a topic. Let's say flowers. This is a very general topic, right? Flowers. And just take a few seconds to think about what you will say, and then try talking about it. Try putting whatever your thoughts are into sentences, and then record it, and then replay it and see how well you spoke on that particular topic? Did you take long pauses? Did you use a lot of and buts? So this way you would be able to test yourself how well you are speaking on a particular topic.
Yeah, that's actually a very great idea.
Do you have any other tips which we may have missed out?
Well, for the essay part, right, there is a link which I found very recently. I wish I had found that link earlier. They have like 100 common essays which usually they ask in IELTS. We can mention that link in the description.
Oh, awesome. That would really be helpful, because once you have those topics in place, you can go well prepared. I mean, it's not that if you are given like 10 topics, you would surely get amongst that.
Yeah.
But I think this would be something very helpful for our viewers. Thank you. So if you really liked these tips, or if you want more information on how you can improve your score, and any personalized questions which you have, please comment below, and we will try to answer them to our best knowledge. Please like, share and subscribe to my channel, and take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.